Welcome to Searching for the Question Live. My name is David Orban, and I am very glad that you are following the show. We are streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Please subscribe, like, follow, do all those things, and ask questions or make comments. That is the beauty of being live, that we can interact. A few episodes ago, actually, I was also posting the backstage link so that random people following the show could join and become part of the show as well. And I don't know if it is going to happen. So Esther is already taking advantage of that and saying good day. So thank you, Esther. And feel free to make any remark that is concerning our theme today. And before we do that, let me just make a couple of recommendations here. At Searching for the Question, we try to be interactive, and one of the things that you can do actually is to suggest new guests that you would like to see on the show, or vote on the guests that others have suggested. As well as, of course, you can become a fan, a supporter, a sponsor, or a benefactor on patreon.com/David Orban, helping me and my team produce this, as well as the various other things that I am doing, experimenting with various platforms and trying to understand what is going on in the world. It's always fun. And some people have been complaining, not enough people see your content, which is very, very good. I have been following it for so long. And I responded that actually, for me, a lot of the fun is just the opportunity of meeting people, talking to friends, hearing updates from them, meeting new people that I haven't met before, and covering subjects that are interesting. I'm learning so much. So I am obviously extremely grateful and very honored for all of you who are following Searching for the Question Live. And it is really great, but I am having fun regardless. And as I said, I am learning a lot. One of the industries, and there are many that I know very little about, one of the industries that I know very little about is the construction business. It is fascinating, right? The ability we have of designing and realizing mega structures of extreme sophistication is fascinating. And of course, in 100 years, we will do even more magical things, and we will look back laughing at how primitive everything we are doing today looks. But skyscrapers and shopping malls and Las Vegas hotels or bridges and all kinds of real structure, steel and glass and concrete are absolutely fascinating. Now, as it turns out, I know a guy who is into this kind of stuff, and he's with us today. Alex, welcome on Searching for the Question Live.
Hello, David. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
As I was getting ready, since you and I have known each other for a few years, how long have we known each other?
It's the Teal Fellowship days.
That's right.
2012, 2013.
Okay, it could be. While you will be talking, answering some question, I will look it up precisely, because I know how to find it in my email archives or on Google Photos maybe. And so when I was looking up some notes, I was wondering when was it that we met last time, and where were we? And I found the photo that we shot as we were together in New York on the Hudson, having a nice dinner on one of these piers. I don't know if it was. Do you remember Pier what?
It was around 22nd Street. So I'm on the west side. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was maybe further up north. It's so cool to go around 46. I don't know. Anyway, it was around here, and this is, New York and Manhattan is an incredible example of the things that I was mentioning. The amount of amazing architecture and ongoing construction in New York is just mind-boggling. You spent a few years in New York, and now you decided to leave. Oh, by the way, I wasn't showing my screen. You could have told me.
Oh, there we go.
I was just playing around without realizing that I'm not sharing it. Sorry.
Yeah, it's further south. Keep going.
Much better than what happened last time, or one of the previous times when it wasn't further down than downtown. Then that I was just talking and I was muted, right? That's the worst.
I had a business meeting, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and I spent the first 10 minutes on mute, and nobody stopped me.
Oh no,
and
that's
and
cool.
Everyone was like, "So are you gonna start?" And I was just, oh my god,
that's so cool.
Yeah, it was terrible. It happens to the best of us.
All right, so this is the place where we were, and this is the photo that I wanted to show. It was a very nice night and a great chat. It was August 2019, a different world. So
Yeah.
how are you personally COVIDing? How are you adapting your life to the pandemic?
Personally, it was very interesting. So I'm not sure, for the folks that are not from the area, New York's been experiencing obviously the highest set of coronavirus cases, and also some civil unrest. And so, in a sense, from a business perspective, as a founder and as a CEO, I had to make some difficult decisions. So about March 5th, we made the decision to permanently send everyone home for this foreseeable future. Actually, the first coronavirus case was about 500 feet from our office, which wow. The first one reported, right? It was right near Grand Central Station. It was at the Chick-fil-A that we go to lunch sometimes. And it was...
Which means that for the past 2, 3, who knows how many weeks, you were with all that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and we have a few folks and their loved ones who have more compromised immune systems, and it just didn't make sense. And to be honest, it was an interesting decision because we have a hardware component, we have a firmware component, we have a software component that's an incredibly complicated technology stack combined with sales and marketing, and we never thought that we could go remote. And it was very interesting. I remember I've had to completely change the way I work. You've known me, I'm a fairly outgoing person, and I tend to do a lot of my work in person, right? Interacting face to face. And so I've had to get a lot more intentional about that. We have given up our office. So one of the challenges as you're a startup, you have limited cash flow. And for those folks listening who have started businesses, you'll know this intimately. And during an uncertain time, you need to make some difficult decisions, and rent in downtown New York is not cheap. So we've sort of gone fully remote. My lease was up, and I couldn't necessarily justify living in New York anymore. There were lines at the grocery stores. It was sort of chaos. And for those that have seen the pictures from New York, I mean, things are boarded up. It looks very much unlike what you would ever think could happen, right? In that part of the world. So I'm living in Madison now. I have a forest for a view, and I don't have to wear a mask 24/7. So I'm doing okay.
Madison,
Connecticut. Yeah, apologies. So about an hour and a half north of the city of New York.
okay, let's look at that too.
Lots of green. There we go.
All right.
Yeah.
And are you close to the water?
Yeah. So right about where your dot is very close to where I'm staying. And then it's about a 10-minute drive south as you go down to Hammonasset State Park, which is that park. If you pan back where you were, yep, that long strip of sandy white beach there. That's a really beautiful state park. So I've been there a couple times, and otherwise lots of hiking, lots of nature, which is nice because I actually grew up close to there.
Oh, okay. And are people wearing masks when you go out?
It's interesting. They were, I mean, so Connecticut's close to New York, but in a way a laggard, I think, in terms of the adoption. A lot of social distancing practices are in place now, but it was very strange in April and parts of May. It was kind of like nothing ever happened. So that was an interesting fact. And then the other thing that has been interesting is as they've started to open things up, I've seen people now walking into like Dunkin' Donuts, for example, with no mask on. And so it's kind of like the psychological component of, oh, we're opening back up and let's just go back to the way it was, and that behavioral shift. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, what we're seeing in the South right now in Florida and parts of Texas is a resurgence in a big way. And I'm not an expert, but you're a scientist and I'm an engineer. We can tell that proper precautions and putting a physical barrier between you and the virus is effective. So
it's non-controversial, right?
Yeah, right. So we'll see. But yeah, that's what the boots on the ground story is here. It's a bit different.
So the TL meeting was actually 2014. Okay. And it was part of the TL Fellowship, gatherings. We were together in this area of downtown Las Vegas.
Yep.
And visited with the founder of Zappos.
Yep. Tony.
Tony Shea, who gave a fantastic talk. His book is greatly recommended. Do you remember the title?
I don't remember the title of his book particularly. Is this on his management culture?
Yeah. Delivering happiness. And Zappos adopted and then abandoned the holacracy approach, where everybody is self-empowered and then very small units self-manage. And when they deployed it, close to 20% of the employees preferred leaving the company rather than being exposed to the freedom of deciding what to do. They would say, no, I'd rather be a robot. You tell me what to do and I will do it. I don't want to think.
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know that was the I mean, it's hierarchy is a very interesting topic, especially now, right? And to an extent, people need structure.
Yeah.
What is its creativity is best constrained, right? We're most creative when we have the most constraint. So that's fascinating. I didn't know that.
So
oh, wow, look at these.
Because that's me there with my Movember mustache, and I organized a Network Society meetup. There you go. That's you.
I haven't seen some of these faces in years.
Of course, of course. And what was fun about this meetup is that it was in a classic garage,
There
and
I am. Look at that.
I was setting up, and there was nobody, literally nobody. And then somebody knocks on the door of the garage from the outside, and all you guys were there waiting to hear about the decentralization and whatever else. So that was fun. And the Thiel candidates still reach out to me periodically, because there's evidently not a lot of mentors that list themselves as such online. So for the candidates, it is always a little bit unclear how the process works.
Yeah.
How should they prepare for the interviews? What the fellowship really looks for when they select the recipients. And so it's always wonderful to interact with young, enthusiastic people you were before you became an old and weathered startup executive.
Little less green behind the ears now, but still
A
green.
More gray.
Yeah, I do have one coming out here.
All right. So was it evident for you that you would want to go into the construction business forever?
No. Life is so interesting. I was reflecting on this because I just had my 5-year work anniversary at Pillar, and it was fascinating because as I'm sitting there at my desk, I'm like, wow, I had a different picture in my head of what my life was going to look like 5 years from now. So it's just it's so interesting, the story that we tell ourselves about where we're going to be. But actually, we started in sports. So I'm not sure if you know a lot of this story, but we we're doing wearable concussion monitoring, and
Yeah.
you remember that? Yeah. So we had this device. It was about the size of a quarter. You'd stick it in a helmet or like a headband. It was on the back of your neck, kind of where the spine meets the base of the skull. And we were detecting impacts. If you got checked in lacrosse or you got put into the boards in hockey, and it was working. We had some great results, but we ran into some really difficult business challenges. One of those was you have a certain amount of liability with any product. And when you tell somebody you put this thing in your helmet, it'll protect you, and it doesn't, for whatever reason, defect, improper installation, etc., there's a lawsuit most likely waiting for you, especially with something as charged as concussion and brain and mental health, especially with young kids. So the team at the time didn't really know how to solve that problem. We were engineers coming out of school. We had no clue, right?
It is a problem that actually does not have a clear solution.
Even today.
It killed the private airplane business in the 70s and the 80s. People would buy themselves planes, and it was expected that the thing would explode. But the widows of drunken, crazy husbands that would end up dying in plane crashes would unavoidably win in the courts.
Yeah.
Because it didn't matter. There would be a few $1 million awarded in damages to the widow anyway. And so that is why now private planes are flown by professional pilots, and the business has not exploded. So we will see about self-driving drones, of course, which won't kill anybody because they don't drink. But yes, that problem is huge. So after that, you went into the construction industry with Pillar.
Correct. Yeah. So that was a really interesting pivot, really interesting time. We ended up, so my alma mater, my university, is heavily involved in the construction industry. And we had a friend who was following along with this work we were doing in concussions. And he said, well, I know you guys are struggling in sports. What about hard hats? And so we thought, hey, you know, maybe this is a problem for these guys. We didn't know a whole lot about some of the challenges we would then learn that inspired the inception of Pillar. But this gentleman helped us to set up some meetings in the Boston. At the time, we were in Boston, in the Boston ecosystem. And it is quite interesting. Within the first 10 minutes of those meetings, the construction firm would go, yeah, that's just not a problem for us. It's just not a top 3 problem. You know, it's just sorry, right? So in a couple of those meetings, we and this is really interesting, the culture of innovation, the culture of thinking outside the box. So we would sit down with some companies that'd be a hard no, like, see ya, you know, quit wasting my time. But some of those companies would say, well, what else can you measure? I get that you're measuring acceleration and impact, but could you measure temperature? Could you measure humidity? And so I guess as decent entrepreneurs, we started to ask why. Why is that an issue? Why is that a problem for you guys? And so we started to learn about a ton of problems and challenges that the industry has pertaining to what we will call environmental conditions on sites. And that's a broad bucket. I'll paint that as 2 parts: property and worker safety. So, for example, on a job site, you may have a big water leak because there's a broken pipe no one knows about. You may also have a fire from a welder, somebody that, you know, there's an ember somewhere and it just was neglected. And you may have carbon monoxide exposure. They're running heavy machinery all over the place. And these job sites are massive. I mean, we're talking up to 1.5 million square feet. That's either vertical or distributed horizontally. And there's a very limited amount of people. And so speaking about, you know, decentralizing your safety protocol, human beings are not the best at doing that job, the work to be done, and technology is. And so we refined this value proposition, which was basically, yeah, the question. Can you hear me?
No, no. Yeah, I will ask my.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm almost done. I just wanted to close the loop on that. Basically, if we put a real-time sensor network across the job site, that will allow us to collect data and then send instant notifications to alert people. And similar vein, I mean, the product in sports and the product in construction are the same concept: alerting and creating awareness. But the way that we tackled it is a bit different.
A step back and talk about the construction industry more in general. I mean, many in businesses that are either total digital or becoming digital at an increasing rate, and the construction business is not one of them. Moving or laying down concrete or working with pipes and all those things is a heavy duty material thing where bits and bytes have lines. So how do you see the construction industry taking advantage of digital, and then we can go back to Pillar more specifically?
Sure. So I think, just to give the folks some context, why construction hasn't scaled. That's like everyone's question. And I think the best example is to use an analogy in manufacturing. When you create a plastic part, you have one mold, and then you can produce 1 million of those parts, and it's the same process every time. That's why, you know, Henry Ford was able to scale up the automobile, as he created the assembly line. So same concept. When you think about construction, every building is like a new part. And so all of the pieces that go into creating that are unique and are being done, relatively speaking, for the first time. And so what that means is you have an enormous amount of collaboration that's required in order to do that. You have a highly irrepeatable process. And you have very uncertain conditions because we're building outside. Could be raining one day and sunny the next. And that contributes to a industry that is incredibly fragmented, incredibly one-off in the product category. And even though we're dealing with $6 billion assets sometimes that are being constructed for doing an airport or something like that. And that leads to a really tough time aggregating all the stakeholders and getting them to buy into standard process. And lastly, the industry is heavily regulated. And so what that creates is a culture of, I won't do it if I don't have to. And unfortunately, that is, you know, the world we live in. But I have seen some really interesting stuff happening in terms of how technology is improving the process. I can talk about a couple things. One is more physical, and that would be in prefab. But let's start with project management. So one of the really interesting and important parts of construction work is being able to collaborate and communicate effectively and quickly. Limiting the time from an issue being created and then solved. And so what we're seeing is product suites like Procore, Autodesk is coming out with some software as well, and then a ton of startups underneath that are solving very meaningful communication issues. They're coming up with real-time data capture technology using smartphone or a 360 camera. Instant collaboration. One of my friends has a company that puts a camera on top of a crane that looks down at what's being picked up, and they can weigh it and understand if there's anyone around that could be affected from a safety perspective. So a lot of, and what's interesting is a lot of these technology solutions are still fragmented. So you need to, like Legos, you have to sort of build a bunch of them together in order to kind of get a full collaboration tool. And then on the other side of that, so on prefab, this is what's really exciting, I think, from a time to market for buildings. You have pieces of buildings being fabricated in a factory where you're controlling all of the environmental conditions, all of the safety conditions. And then they get to job site and literally, like Legos, get built. They just pick it up, put it down, and bolt it together. And I think that those processes, while fairly new and not necessarily as common as I think they should be, will ultimately become the future because they're more efficient, they're safer, they will cost less money. I think construction will have to evolve, whether it's being pulled, kicking and screaming into the future. Technology will play a big role in that.
Not only that is fascinating, but your level-headed management of the stream while I was doing some acrobatics is also quite good, because I don't know what brought me to alert you that if I leave the stream, you shouldn't worry because everything will be fine and you can keep going. But that is exactly what happened. My main machine started misbehaving and I joined on my phone.
Nice.
But the platform is good enough to just go while all of this is happening in the background. And you were good enough as well. So thank you for that.
Thanks for the heads up.
So the um, the 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 bottlenecks for all of this to happen, are numerous. They are not only uh, in technology, and the construction is it true, like it would look at the out from the outside, especially looking at a market so rich and important like Manhattan real estate, that the construction business seldom has a problem with financial resources, or already that is not that true?
Oh, I mean, I think it's to the contrary. I think it's true all the time.
So it
It,
does have problem with financial resources.
yeah, yeah. It often happens because you have so many unknown variables. When you think about financial modeling, you try to limit the inputs. And if you do have a lot of inputs, you try to make sure you know you have a certain degree of confidence about each input. With construction, because it's real time, and I'm happy to expound upon sort of the value chain of how the financial dollars actually come into the market and how that flow looks, because I'm watching that very closely because of coronavirus. But oftentimes project will get delayed. Some critical piece of equipment is stuck on the highway because the tractor trailer got a flat tire. I mean, this happens, right? This is a thing. And because that happens, then the guys that were supposed to install it, who were scheduled and were booked at that time, now get delayed, can't come, and then they have to go to another job. And then so it becomes a week before they can actually come back and do that piece of equipment. And then maybe then something is critical in that process. And so now all the other trades are pushed out. So it becomes this large ripple effect downstream that can be quite challenging and quite costly. So
And
that's just one
does that
example.
mean that when Tesla is able to complete the building of their Shanghai Gigafactory um, on time, or even before the original deadline set, is really a remarkable achievement?
I would say yes, not knowing too much about that project. Two caveats there. One is China has a little bit more relaxed construction practices, so safety isn't quite as prominent, and they can build faster because there's less regulation, less sort of red tape. U.S. has a lot of red tape, especially Manhattan. So I'm not surprised. I still think it's an accomplishment to get it done on time and under budget, or ahead of schedule. But and also I think from Musk down, the culture is one of do it right, and they're gonna spend the money to do it right. And I think that they're probably investing in infrastructure, technology, etc., to make sure that the project gets done right, because it's more important for it to get done right than for the cheapest dollar. And that's when you look at the owner relationship with the building, that is a very important factor, right? How important to me is it that this is built with quality and high integrity versus I'm just going to throw it up and sell it and it's someone else's problem.
Amazing, especially because a well-built home will last many, many decades.
Yeah.
So whatever you are not doing right at the beginning will have a ripple effect all through the life of the building. And any homeowner knows how important it is to take ownership of something that is done really well. You mentioned the impact of coronavirus on the construction industry. So, how would you characterize that? On one end of the spectrum, there are people like me who, I mean, I am not going to physical conferences anymore, and that is a bit strange.
Right,
Um,
right, right, right.
I miss traveling a lot because I love it. But at the same time, I realize that I gained, I don't know, probably 30% of cognitive functions just because I'm not constantly jet lagged. And other than that, everything I do is digital, just as it has been before. On the other end of the spectrum, there's the restaurant business, which in my opinion is completely over. If a restaurant had a 20-30% margin, and that is already very healthy, and now they are told that they need to reduce the number of servings that they sell
Right.
by 50, 60, 70, 80%, there's just no way that they will be able to adapt to that new reality under the same business model. So in this spectrum, where is the construction industry? Is it a little impacted, or is it extremely impacted? And how is it adapting?
Yeah, David, I'll do my best to answer that because it's very nuanced. But I think I can take a high level approach. I would say in some cases it's in the middle. And so what I mean by that is most job sites are running reduced crews. So you're going to see up to 50% reduction in expenses, in headcount. And you'll see roughly, we surveyed our customers recently, and we found, I think it was about $1,500 a day in increased spending just to deal with coronavirus. So if you look at that over a year, you're looking at close to $500,000 in additional budget that's necessary to just deal with this, not including the delays because you don't have enough people on site in order to build to schedule. So there's this. That is a real-time challenge that we're dealing with on a daily basis, and plus keeping all these guys safe. I mean, they're having people actually stand 6 feet apart and hang drywall. Now, if you know how big a drywall board is, like 8 foot by 4 foot, that is a heavy piece of material. It is very hard to do that 6 feet apart. And so I think what you're going to find is in 6 months from now, I think we'll be in a very different place in terms of the challenges. I think you'll see a lot of projects struggling to finish on time. I think a lot of projects are going to struggle on budget. We're seeing right now a month and a half to a 3 month delay in most of our projects. That means, let's see, if a typical job is 24 months long, you're looking at roughly 10% of budget, maybe a little more in some cases. So we'll see. It's going to be really interesting. Also, the payback on these assets, right? They basically build the math on these financial models to say, hey, we're going to open on this date. We're going to get it leased up by this date, and then we're going to start making money, and then we're going to pay off our debtors or our investors. Now all that's shifted. So if I did math, if I had an interest rate from a bank, and I took $30 million out, it could be a significant amount of interest before I'm able to even start paying back on that loan, and then that ripples down into my returns and my math that I did even justify the development of that project in the first place. So it's very complicated. It has financial implication, a labor implication, a quality implication. Now think about it. I have 50% reduced workforce. These guys are working all the time. They're strapped. They have to finish on time, or they're being pushed to aggressively finish the project, which we know will affect quality. And to your point of having an asset that has integrity, that could be a real issue. And the insurance companies are very concerned because they wrote the premium based on the known quantity and the historical loss that they've encountered under normal business economic conditions. And so I guess what I'm getting at is the whole value chain
being canceled yet.
Some of them are being canceled. We're working with a carrier right now who's actually requiring the installation of our technology to these construction firms because of the increased risk of exposure to their book of business. So it's a real concern. Yeah. The last,
Sorry, did you say
yeah,
that that the desirability of your solution increased because of COVID in this scenario?
really interesting sort of outcomes here. So our market presence selling to contractors has been significantly affected. On the
Uh,
flip side,
Now
our
let's go back a little bit because I don't think that um, we described at a sufficient level of detail what does the pillar pod do, and then let's connect it to why it is so specifically useful now for both the construction business as well as to the insurers.
sure, sure. So what folks are looking at right now is actually a screenshot of our physical piece of hardware. That is our pod. It has 8 different environmental metrics in there, including temperature, humidity sensors, particulate, carbon monoxide, and several more. And what that's doing is collecting all that data and transmitting it back to the cloud where we're analyzing it. That pod is one of many that are strategically placed across the entire construction site to create like a nervous system. So just as your body has nerve endings, I'm cold and hot, we are setting up a sensor network to do what your nerve endings do for your body. And so that data is then coming back to us. We build models uh, based on the risks we know about, and we compare the data from the site to the model to understand if there's a condition present that's unwanted. It could be, as I said, fire, water, mold. It could be like dust particulate that people are breathing in that could be really, really bad. And then we're able to pass that on to the site team and say, hey, you have an issue. It's here in the building. So I'll tie that back to the insurance companies. Well, first I'll start with construction companies. As I said, don't have a lot of budget, or they're being very frugal with spending for obvious reasons that I just explained. On the flip side, the frugality is concerning to the insurance carriers, because if they're rushing people, that may mean that the certain joints on the tubing, the piping that they're installing for water aren't getting crimped or soldered properly. It could mean that they're doing a sloppy job insulating the building. So what does this mean? Well, if you're in the winter and you have frozen pipes, that's a water loss. And if the building is not insulated correctly, that could be a water loss for many years, every year, right? So what we're talking about is sort of a real-time loss prevention strategy using technology like ours, and then a long tail difficulty of, do we want to insure this property once it's finished? And a lot of these big carriers, they have 2 books of business. They have a construction book and they have a commercial property book. And it's most profitable to roll them over, right? If I know how it got built, then chances are I want to underwrite it. And so we're looking at how Pillar can package that data up and make it meaningful to the carrier so that they can make a better decision underwriting in the property side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very, very clear. I always liked Pillar because it, for me, represents a very clear example of unexpected value that is generated by Internet of Things applications that are penetrating novel markets and novel businesses. When 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we would talk about the Internet of Things and what it will mean, well, we wouldn't have thought, and at the time we did not think of the construction business and the insurance providers improving their practices through sensors that are installed the way that you are doing now. And at the same time, once this is recognized, all kinds of new possibilities open up that are becoming now more clear in terms of the data over the life cycle of the business, or what kind of other sensors could be valuable, or how is a network of sensors is enriching different kinds of services, not only during the construction but later. And I'm sure that you are also thinking, of course, about many of these possibilities now that you have a certain basis that is that you built in terms of both hardware and software technology.
Correct. Yeah. So it's interesting. I'll just share one of the I'll say the future vision of the company for those that are interested. We've discovered that construction is a really unique time in a building's life cycle, because with the right planning, you can actually embed sensing technology into a structure in ways that you could never retrofit because it would be too expensive. For example, putting a sensor behind a wall to make sure that the humidity behind the wall was not going to lead to mold growth. I mean, that's a real issue. I was on a hospital job. They were tearing out all the drywall, and it was black mold. There was black mold behind the wall in a hospital, right? Not good. So the idea of creating a smart asset starts way before it's even finished. And that's the opportunity we've identified. And so if you think about Pillar as sort of this nervous system during construction, we're thinking about how to create the nervous system that gets embedded in the building during construction that can live on with the building after construction. And we're working with the insurance carriers and owners and developers to concept this and actually start to prototype some of these solutions. We're really excited because if I can reduce, for example, what's the economic value here? If your property insurance is, let's just say, 5% less expensive over the next 10 years because you installed this, then I've not only have I made my money, but you've paid off that investment 5-6 times over. And that's the value that we're looking to unlock using Internet of Things.
And that is very, very valuable. And I am not surprised that Pillar as a startup has been successful for raising its seed fund and then additional rounds. How much did you raise in total until now?
Oh, I think we're at 7.5 million so far.
All right, starts to be serious money, right?
Some pocket change. Yeah.
Yeah. And Daniel Strachman was a guest on the show a few weeks ago too.
Fantastic.
And
she's awesome.
She's very happy to be an investor. And I really see a lot of different ways to keep adding value. Now, one thing, going back to COVID a little bit, is your pod built in China, and have your supply chains been disrupted?
Yeah, fortunately, no. We made the decision pretty early on to look at economies of scale, and we're not at the 50,000 units a month quantity level. And so what we said was, you know what? It's higher risk to manufacture overseas. I can't go walk over to the factory, bang on the door, and talk to somebody easily. So we make them actually in northern Massachusetts with a contract manufacturer. So they're made in the U.S. with global parts, and that has proved to be such a lucky business decision, specifically now, because yes, we have a higher piece price, but the ability to still conduct business is unquantifiable, right, in terms of its value. So that was, I can't take credit for that one. That was sort of luck of the draw there, but we fortunately are okay.
That's great. So I know you have a hard stop. There's a lot that we could keep discussing, of course, because things or other means, the digitization of the construction industry has only just started.
Just started.
And looking at even further developments that we have been experimenting with a lot of for some time, but they haven't been widely deployed in the construction business, like 3D printing, for example. We can see how digital manufacturing can become an important new way for unlocking a lot of value in our economies and the way that we live. In the meantime, I want to thank you for coming to the show and
Thank you.
for telling us about your challenges, also the very dynamic way that you are reacting to them. And I wish you and Pilar great success going forward.
Thank you. No, it's been a pleasure, David. It's always good to chat with you. Something interesting every time.
And I am absolutely looking forward to be able and join you for a wonderful dinner in New York, or
In person.
in your place in where are we? In
Madison.
Madison, Connecticut.
Yeah, let's do it anytime.
I will take my passport and come there as my friend and a fanatic Manhattan resident. Michael Smallins would say anytime he leaves Manhattan, he takes his passport.
There you go. It's the country of New York. David, thank you so much.
Thank you. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today on Searching for the Question Live. I really have to commend StreamYard for how cool a platform they have, because I don't know how many other platforms would be able to really support not only the ease of use that StreamYard has, but the kind of hiccups that we had today. I don't know if you realized, but my main computer has some internet connectivity problems, and I was able to come in and just keep going from my phone. And obviously our guest was cool-headed enough to keep going while I was having these problems, and we saved the day. And not every platform would have been able to do the same. So why don't I actually show you this? If you go to davidorban.com/StreamYard referral, you will be able to get some discount. I don't remember what it is, but both you and I will benefit from this if you want to sign up on StreamYard and adopt it. So thank you again. Please vote for future guests on this URL. Sign up for my newsletter on this other one. If you speak Italian, subscribe to the Italian channel on davidorban.com/YouTube Italiano. And if you feel that the content that I create together with my team is valuable, I encourage you to become a fan, a supporter, a sponsor, or a benefactor on patreon.com/DavidOrban. Thank you, and see you next time on Searching for the Question Live.